Hi everyone, good morning. So sorry to have kept you waiting, but I see that Frank is now on the call. Thank you so much for making time to attend this session. I think we're going to be able to learn a lot from the three keynote speakers that we have today. It just so happens that they're all my friends, and I'm really excited to hear what they have to share with entrepreneurs. They all have extensive experiences dealing with entrepreneurs in one way or another. And without wasting any more time, I'd like to invite Frank to start the session. The session is recorded, so you'll be able to have access to it. And it's also currently streaming on YouTube, so you'll be able to access it in future. So Frank, I don't know whether you're ready to share your screen.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me first of all?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I don't need to be seen, right? But I think like my video anyway. Okay. So there it is coming on in a second. Yes. So very good. Okay. Yeah. You can see my screen?
Yes, you can see your screen.
And you can see me. I think so. But it's not that important anyway. Well, let me just disable the video for the sake of the guys with bandwidth and stuff. Yeah. Okay. Ready to start when you let me to.
We are ready for you. Feel free to begin.
Okay. Yeah. So hi guys. Yeah, so hi guys. Thank you so much for making time to like attend this talk. And Betty, thank you for the opportunity with the engineering community. I feel like my dad would laugh at me right now because of some swears I gave him. I told him I'll never be an engineer. And then further down the line, I end up being one. So it's really hilarious. Anyway, so I just want to talk about co-founders, and my talk is going to be a little bit short-ish or longish, and then I'm just gonna take answers or questions, or I'm going to interact with the guys who are going to ask me the questions. So as much as possible, try and engage either personally. You can ask because there are parts that I'll actually want you to interact with yourself. So the first thing that I've always learned with all these talks is you always have to start by saying who you are, because not everyone knows exactly who you are. So my name is Frank. I go by that Tamre Frank or Frank Tamre on Twitter or on socials, including LinkedIn. I like categorizing it as a social media platform. Yeah, I am all of these things sort of like put together. So I am a software engineer, a consultant, architect. Most of the time I like architecting software and big systems. And then I co-founded Moringa School, and now I have co-founded another startup, which is AliCamp, plus a couple others that we are sort of like trying to like do research on and learn stuff. And then I mostly love running communities. That is like giving back to people, offering my skills, my time, my effort, my energy. That's something that I love doing. And I do this through Android 2.5 for Kotlin Kenya and Azure Kenya. So besides the point, what I want to actually cover is just like this for three things rather, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions. And the four things are, I want to talk about relationships, for horsemen, and co-founder tips. So this is for those people also who are, if you're probably in a relationship and you do not have a co-founder, this is probably going to be a talk that is going to help you. But anyway, besides the point. So now let's get right into it. So the first thing is, I just want to get into this point of self-reflection. So you can raise your hand. I know right now these are like virtual talks, so try and engage. You know, it's really cold, so try and like, you can stretch yourself. So you can raise your hand, or you can even type in the YouTube or whatever section and raise your hand if you have ever dated. Yeah, if you've never dated, it's fine. It's okay. There's no problem with you. This is dated, past tense. Yeah, you're currently dating. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you who you are dating or who you dated, all those things. No, just self-reflection again. And if you have ever ended a relationship, if you have, I call it a privilege to end a relationship, or maybe you are ended. It's that I've been hearing a lot of English being broken in a session. I mean, so I'm trying to also practicing is good. So if you've ever ended a relationship or you have been ended in a relationship, yeah. Okay, cool. So you're probably wondering, like, what's the relationship between all of these things? And remember when I was starting, I said we're going to talk about like all those 4 things. And the first item that I need to talk about is relationships. And so on relationships, we have had that word relationship. But the big question that I guess most people have never sort of like answered is, when you talk about relationships for that matter, what exactly are you referring to? Yeah. So is it that you're talking about 1 second, I think, wait, what did I do? I did something, sorry. Yeah, so when we talk about relationships, second there, yes, relationships, yes, good, okay, good. Yeah, so when we talk about relationships, most of the time what we are referring to here is that it's usually a compound word, but I don't think most people look at it from that aspect of like a relationship per se. For that matter, is that I feel like most people look at it like, oh yeah, this is that big word that people like throwing around. But if we look at like relationships in general, what a relationship is it's like, it's this compound word, right? And I'm going to talk about it next. But like, if you try and infer into those relationships that we've been in, the cycle of most of these relationships, and I'm talking about these romantic ones or these other ones, it's most of the time you meet a person, they blow you off your mind or your feet, and then you have your first talk, then you ask them out, then you give them a proposal. The proposal could be either you want to be boyfriend and girlfriend with them, or you want to be, I don't know, wife, husband thing with them. And then there's usually that happy time, you know, where they are the only bean in your githeri, the only flower in your, what is it, an orchard or an orchard, or the only fruit in that whole plantation, you know, and you have all of these nice things that you say about them. They are heaven, they are angel. When you look at them, they are amazing. These are usually the happy times, you know. And then usually get into that first argument phase where I usually see like most people usually prefer to just let's just rosy it, you know. This is an angel, I also want to be an angel. I'm not going to hurt them, I'm just going to be very soft with them, you know. So they either, you hate being late, even though I told them that, so they arrive late and it really pisses you off, and then you're like, no, you know, it's really okay. And then we sort of like, we sweep it under the rug. We don't sort of like deal with it. What we do is like, no, you know, it's okay, it's fine, I get it, blah blah blah, and you know, yeah, we are good, but we are really not good. And then there's the next phase where we get at, which is mostly, hey, yeah, let's, but then you don't talk, and then it ends. And then, you know how we usually summarize it? Is usually summarize it with something like, hey, you know what, the way we do it the Kenyan way, you know, in the Swahili word we'll say what, nilijua hata haiendi mahali, nilijua hii relationship haiendi mahali. Or if I can translate that is, I just knew this thing was not headed anywhere, you know, even from the start. Oh my God, stop lying to us. Used to be happy before. Please, you guys knew it was headed somewhere, whatever place it was headed to. But the key thing here is, when you look at that whole bit of relationship, and as I've broken down that whole journey, there are 2 aspects, which is you are relating with someone and you're on a ship. I like creating that aspect so that people understand that, hey, it's a ship that you're on and you're relating with someone. So the 2 of you are captains and you need to guide this thing to go somewhere. And what you're guiding is this ship. And now the thing is, when you're guiding it, remember, a ship does not exist on air. A ship is on the ocean. And if you've ever had the opportunity to Google or look at an ocean or whatever it is, you'll realize that an ocean does not have, it's not calm all through. There are places where the ocean is very calm. Leave the seashore. If you've gone to Mombasa and you're jumping, that is just, that's close to the seashore. Talk about the ocean itself. Yeah, there are places where it's really calm. No waves, no nothing, it's just calm. And then there are places where their waves are very small, you know, and then there are places where the waves are really crazy, and then there are places where it's really, really huge. Now, one of the things that people need to remember again when you talk about them is that this ocean, it needs the 2 of you to be serious. Otherwise, what will happen is you guys can quickly end up destroying it. And as I was talking about that whole destroying it, and I know you're wondering like, hey, what's up with this? So when you're relating with your co-founder, one of the very important things that you need to remember is that the 2 of you are relating on a certain journey, and you're about to deal with like so much drama. And the drama that you're about to deal with here is that everything is going to get crazy so fast, because the difference between sort of like dating or like these normal relationships and like a startup is that you are together there, you know, you're just going to be shocked, the two of you. Now, one of the very few things that people forget also is when you look at startups, top 10 reasons why startups fail. The third reason, and this is research that was done, is that the reason why it will fail is because of these relationships between the co-founders. And those relationships with these co-founders is that people forget that this co-founder relationship it's a very needy one. And the difference is, it's like you guys have met together and are married and there's a child there. And it's not like you guys had the child and had 9 months. No. So the child has just appeared, and you guys need to figure out, know this person, know the child, and figure out how to create this very nice, conducive relationship environment so that the child can grow up well and benefit you. Now, what people end up doing, though, what they forget is that very quickly we go to disintegrate and start creating these 4 horsemen. And what these 4 horsemen are, if you are a Christian, I'm not going to assume like everyone's a Christian. If you're a Christian, there's a part where they talk about like horsemen who come and destroy the world and all those things. It might look like fiction to you, but bear with me. I'm just going to draw this to like relationships per se. And so when you look at this 4 horsemen, they come in stages. There's one where when you get at, by then there's no going back to that. It's really next to, it's hard, it's impossible or hard. Let me say hard, not impossible. It's hard to get back away from that. 1 or 2 people have probably gotten away from that, but it's hard. But so these 4 horsemen are both in relationships and both in your co-founder sort of like arrangement and things that you do together. And so I'm talking about this based on parts of experience and things that I've actually asked about. And this is because I actually did Moringa School when I co-founded it with Audrey, and I ended up leaving. And some of the things later on when I was sitting down and analyzing it is that I realized, like, hey, you know what? I went through this whole cycle and this whole 4 horsemen thing. And those 4 horsemen, the way sort of like it happened was we sort of like ignored some of the core things and swept things under the rug, you know, slowly by slowly until the end of it. Okay, so these 4 horsemen, what are they? So the first one, criticism. Criticism is you there's a difference between and most people really need to learn this. You can raise a complaint. Criticism is not bad, but it's the way you do it or how are you doing it. Now, I teach kids in the new startup that I'm doing, early camp, and you always have to point out at some issues, because part of the value add in the whole aspect that we do there is, in as much as I'm teaching you how to code, but you know, I'm spending a lot of time with the kids, so I have to infuse some certain level of character development in that. And you have to criticize the kids. So what do you do when you're criticizing? When you're offering criticism? I've said when you're offering criticism, we don't criticize the children when you're offering criticism. So there's a difference between criticizing your co-founder versus criticizing or offering a critique, or you know, or voicing a complaint. So the two are about specific issues. When you talk about I'm offering a critique or I'm criticizing a certain aspect, it's like, hey, I'm criticizing your actions, and that's what people are supposed to criticize, the action, not the person. And 90% of the time, because of the communication that we've not practiced, because we're not that awake to the kind of conversations we have with our co-founders, what happens is we end up saying different things. So let me give you an example. So a complaint can be, a good example here is, I was scared when you were running late and didn't call. I thought we had agreed we'd do this for, you know, we're having a meeting. I got scared and didn't do this. So, you know, and you know, the fun part is that you add that with, you know what, I thought you would be more invested in this startup. I thought you'd be more committed in this startup. Criticism, that's a complaint. The first one is a complaint, yeah. The second one is, yo, how come you never think about, you know, the things that you do and your lateness, the way it affects people? You know, I just don't believe you can be this rude and this tardy, you know, and you throw in all the vocabulary that you've ever learned. And so the difference between the two is the second one, you're actually attacking the person, not the action. This is irrespective of whether they do this all the time. And I know obviously someone is already awake, probably in the comments or inside their heads. They're like, oh my God, but they do this all the time. It is okay. I know they do it all the time. But hey, remember, what are you supposed to be doing? You're supposed to constantly offer criticism. Don't criticize your co-founder, because the problem with criticizing your co-founder, then you can end up being too critical about it. And the problem with this is usually the start of everything. So the moment criticism starts to come in and you're doing it wrong, it's okay to offer criticism. I'm not saying that now you say, oh no, everything is fine. No, conflict is good. Do not say conflict is bad. Conflict is good. And how you resolve these conflicts is also really good. And that's something that I really needed to learn, because for me, I love my space. I don't like someone coming to destroy my space and stuff like that. So I don't like that. I don't like drama. And so I really stay away from all that. And I really don't like the public eye. So when someone comes in and they're like, yeah, this is this, I'm like, okay, I just want it to be calm, And that was like before, until I had to force myself to be the person who really loves offering criticism to people and receiving it. So this goes two-way traffic. When someone offers criticism to you, you also need to be wise enough to accept it and say, okay, you know what? We can do this. How do you solve this? It's very easy. So for instance, instead of saying you always do this. Why are you so selfish? Instead of saying that, you should just say something like, hey, you know what? I am feeling really left out in all this decision making. Can we please talk about this? You get what I mean? It's a very nice way of putting it out and really order yourself, arranging yourself on how to talk, and also presenting your ideas. Now, the next thing that comes after criticism is contempt. Madarau, that is how we call it in Swahili. And what that happens is, and this is something that I noticed also when I was in my startup, is that the first thing happens is, once we start with, when you're really communicating in this level, we are really being, we've come to this point where we are being mean. Madarau is meanness. When you communicate out of contempt, is really meanness. The problem of contempt is contempt goes far beyond criticism. A good example is you guys are working together. Someone mentions maybe they're tired, or someone mentions they are, they've been really, slaving for the whole week. And so that, by the, can I do this maybe next week? And so there you go. You're like, oh my God, please, for crying out loud, do you think I don't work over here? Yeah. How come you're not considerate? And I am the one who's usually doing all of this stuff with this startup. I'm the only one who cares about this startup. I'm the only one who's putting in a lot of effort. What the hell do you do? Why can't you just not put yourself in my shoes? Yeah. I don't see anything that you're doing here. Oh my goodness, they're doing something. That's why they're there. So just try and get it from their point. And the problem with criticism is that, with contempt, is that you're attacking, why criticism, you're attacking the person's character. Contempt is you are like a god. You are flawless, you have zero mistakes. And the worst part about this contempt part statements that people make is that people add the fact that, oh, I am not perfect, but the moment you use the word but, it's like you've negated everything that came before it. And these are they look very basic things that people are not aware of when they're communicating with their co-founders, but it's something that they start to really create that. Now, the thing about contempt is that if I sit down with two co-founders, because that's what I end up doing nowadays, is that you sit down with two co-founders, I'm telling you the truth, the moment I realize that there's contempt between the two co-founders, I usually know these guys are headed for a split. If not in the next 1 month, 1 week, 2 months, within a year or 2 years, these guys are going to be split already, or one person is just going to leave. Because the problem with contempt is you can never come away, you can never come back from it, because this other person feels really, they're bothered or bogged down about it. Now, the thing with contempt also is, for instance, is how you can solve it is that you have to be able to say, talk about the action. Talk about the action. No matter how much they do it so many repeatedly, don't say, yo, I know you. No, don't say that. Just mention, talk about the action itself. The other bit also that I need to mention also is about defensiveness, where now defensiveness comes as a result of the criticism. That's what someone does. So for instance, if someone asks, by the way, did you remember to send that email? and tell those people that you're going to show up maybe 15 minutes late. And a defensive response would go something like, oh yeah, you know what, by the way, my schedule was busy. I had all these many meetings, you remember, and I had to pitch, blah, blah, blah. They're not actually addressing the fact that they didn't do it. They're just being defensive because they know they're going to be criticized again. They actually expect it. So these are usually, instead of you saying that, just be honest enough and admit and say, hey, you know what, by the way, I forgot to do this. That's my fault. Let me call them right away. There's no point with you accepting, because no one is going to be perfect in the whole of this journey. Now, apart from, and then there's the last one, which is now stonewalling. Stonewalling is when now someone just totally switches off. I call it apathy. And once you get to point of apathy, you know, there's usually no turning back, because now stonewalling is by the, you know what, I don't care. It's like this person will talk, it will get into the left and come out on the right. Now, as I begin to like round up all of this, the thing that I've actually come to learn about all these co-founders is that there are all these tips. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, do you need one? I know we always tell ourselves like, yo, you know what, by the way, everyone will say like you need a co-founder, blah, 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 but maybe do you actually need one? Would it be better off you being a founder and getting advisors and, you know, hiring all those CEOs, C-somethings, and you just run the business? You know, you can be a business owner, for crying out loud, or an investor in your own company, you know, if you want to do that, and you focus on other things and you run it, you know, doesn't mean that you have to be there 100% doing it. So do you actually need one? And this one is where, if you draw it to your personal life, is ask yourself, do you really need to date? You know, sometimes you have questioned yourself. I know some of you have actually questioned yourself and asked yourself, do I really need to date someone? You know, and we add words like, if this is the drama going on out here, do I really need to do this? I can really stay out from all of this drama. And now the second thing that is really also interesting is, as you're getting all of these co-founders and whatever, please try and align them to your personal values, because you know what, your personal values will not stay the same. If this person you know very well and you've known them for some time, this person is a person who comes late, for instance, and you cannot stand lateness, please don't do it. If this person is a person who is dishonest, or maybe not even to an extreme extent, I've seen guys who cannot start a company with someone who is not a Christian and they are Christians, or they are Muslim and they are Muslims. They can't do that. They're like, they need to be in my also religious circles. So please go and get someone who actually aligns with it. The other bit is also communication. Now, there's a difference between communication and talking and speaking. So please try as much as possible and communicate with the person. Communication means that you're not talking, you are actually saying something, and they actually give you a cue that they've actually understood what you're saying. So it's like two-way traffic is communication. Talking is just one way, speaking is just one way, but communication is two-way traffic. The other bit is, don't sweep issues under the whatever. I've said yeah, whatever is because it could be under the bed, under the rug, under the whatever. So things come and you just let them slide, you let them slide, you let them slide like that. So please try and deal with issues. And to this, I usually say, be a fan of conflict. Conflict is really good. Conflict is really fun, but I'm not saying you have too much conflict, but conflict is good, because if you're addressing them, not all the time, but don't be afraid of dealing with conflict, the both of you or the three of you or whatever. Be dealing with it, and do not be a fan of taking sides. Be very sober when you're dealing with this conflict. So don't sweep issues under the whatever. Then there's the issue of ownership. We talk about ownership. Just because you guys are co-founders does not mean that you guys need to get equal ownership. You could do this as a vesting agreement. Hey, we have this brilliant idea and we'll vest our shares. So you'll get 50% after we get to these specific milestones. When we raise Series A, when we get to this number of sales, this is when we will get 50% of ownership. So that's the thing. And then also define the roles, who's doing what, where and where. I know people are usually big on like, yeah, I'm going to be the C something. But sometimes it's better for you to say, what are the things we need to do in our startup? And then now based on those needs that you have, then that's what you align to each other. Last but not least is that be very, very truthful. This is the one thing that I feel like most people don't have it. And being truthful means, are you truthful to yourself and truthful to the other person and to your startup? Many are the times that we've had of scenarios where people are really not honest. You are not going to show up tomorrow because of something and you say, oh yeah, because I'm sick. No, if you have a whatever thing, date thing, family thing, be open to the co-founder and tell them that. And I think that's usually something that starts creating this very nice and healthy relationship. So bottom of my heart, really, really thank you. Betty, I don't know if anyone has a question at this moment. I don't know if you're there, because I think I am done, and even my time is +1. I think so. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Frank. Yes, we're still here. I
Yeah.
see we have Caleb, Moses, and Philip on the call. I don't know whether any of them have questions for you.
Okay.
I have. Hi, Frank. Thank you for the.
Yes, Caleb.
Yeah, thank you for the for the talk. I had a question with regards to there's this slide where you have shown does when you're starting your company, do you need to have a co-founder? So
Yes.
how can someone tell that maybe they need a co-founder or they can do it on their own? Because there's this saying that for you to go far, you need to, go in a group. So
Yeah.
sometimes is it possible for somebody to try and do it alone? What are the factors that will help one to really figure out that probably he needs to go alone, or probably it will be wise for him or her to look for a co-founder? Thank you.
Okay. Well, yeah. So thanks for the question. So the thing is that the biggest thing that for me right now, I'll tell you for a fact, is there are some core things that I feel like a business will need in perpetuity, right? So you come and look at yourself and ask yourself, what's my percentage? What am I really, really good at? You get what I mean? And especially this is when you're starting out, because a co-founder is, you guys are starting something out. It's not a business that's running. You guys are starting something out. It's either it's been running for some time and you need this person there full time, blah, blah, blah. And so 90% of the time, these are usually skills, abilities that you really do not have. Number one, I do not like talking to people. For example, I'm not saying I don't like to, but I don't like talking to people. And the business is a product that will need us to be in front of people. Marketing, advertising thing. I'm talking about you're in the core marketing and advertising company, engineering, whatever. And so if you're providing solutions for things like this, and you know very well, this is something that's going to be there in perpetuity. I really need a co-founder to do this, to help me come in and let's be a team so that we can run this thing together. So that's like the most, for me, I usually summarize it as that. This is a skill that you will need in perpetuity in your business. At some point, yes, you will need to change. Another thing is I need a co-founder because I am doing a solution that will be doing, let's say it's going to be offering, you see, like the way you have hardware, people talk about, oh yeah, we're going to create like medical equipment. I'm talking about the software part for maybe cancer, for removing cancerous cells. Now, if I'm making that software, I am good at programming. That's my strong set. No one beats me at that. I'm really good at that. But there is the bit where I need someone who will help me unlock those business deals, those meetings, those whatevers. Then at that very moment, it is better for me to say, hey, one, I can't afford to pay this guy to do this for me. But I can afford to say, hey, can we get into a shareholding thing, or this person also aligns with you, and then you can go there, aligns with your values or aligns with your principles and is actually passionate about this company that you're starting out. So I would actually look at passion. I would actually passion in that whole concept that you're building for maybe the long term or whatever. It could even be 5 years. Doesn't matter. And then the other bit is also being honest and saying, like, look, this is where I come short and this is what I'm good at. Please don't lie to yourself. There is no one that was built to be 100% all-rounder. And I know the good examples of people who do it this alone is probably like Elon Musk, or a Jeff Bezos or something. But even if you look keenly at their companies, I would never throw Mark Zuckerberg here, by the way. I'm talking about this just on the software side. There are probably people that we are a Google away, search away, and you could actually know them. Now, the thing that you'll find with all these people is look at the people that they surround themselves with. Even before Elon Musk could start his whole SpaceX and whatever, Tesla, he had already done PayPal with co-founders, a team of people. So by the time they come in this way, they have this network of people who they know. I'm going to reach out to this brilliant marketing person. There's this growth hacking person. There's this other person on this other side. So if these are responsibilities that are not necessarily key to your business, like growing, I usually say, hey, why not hire this person out? Why not hire this person out instead of like bringing them full time into there? Because the co-founder will really need to go beyond just making software to just, they'll have to go beyond making or running, doing a specific role, but they'll also help in growing the company, thinking about the growth of the company and also the way, the path that it's supposed to flow going forward. So I don't know whether I've answered you, Caleb, with that question.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. But don't hesitate. If you have any other questions, you can just like reach out or something, and then we can have this chat further.
Frank, I see Moses is asking on the chat regarding the issue of shares.
Yeah.
Is it nice to have equal proportions no matter who coined the idea you're working on?
No. So I'm never at equal proportions when. If you have to give away shares, and this is something I've seen most people who start companies make. If you have to give away shares, don't give shares when you're starting out. Give shares after, vested. Hey, we are starting today. We don't have any ownership, but as we do this, base it on milestones. Because I'll tell you the main challenge we have right now is we are in this society. I've been doing a lot of like thinking. The society we have currently here in Kenya or like in the world is we have this thing where the brain doesn't want to work by default. Our brains don't like to work. So what happens is we say, what's the quickest way I can get to being chilled? So then we say, let me be a trailer, or let me just be there, and then let's see how far this thing goes. Now, most people will say, I am here for the long term, but they're not willing to put in the work. Don't give equal shares when you start out. Say, hey, you know what, by the way, as we're starting out today, we don't own anything. But these are the milestones that we are agreeing on, the both of us. We are saying at this point, when we get to 200,000 shillings in sales profit, then we will have 10% each ownership. When we get to this, these are the milestones that we have. And these milestones are totally connected to each other, and they are very clear in that this person knows what they are doing and this other person knows what they are doing. Now, that easily helps, and also helps the people define and say, okay, fine, I know myself as Frank, I am going to get this percent of ownership. I'm going to get 20% ownership after this period of time, based on these things that I do. So even if I'm getting the 20%, it's not in vain. The other person also doesn't feel bad because they know, you know what, by the way, they're being honest. They brought the company from 0 to 1 million. In profit in shares within this period of time. You get what I mean? And if someone doesn't do that, they forfeit it. You have to talk about it again and again. 50-50 ownership. There's a pal of mine that we're dealing with. We were having an issue. I was helping him sort out an issue, and so brought me in, and we were talking about their startup. And the blunder that they did was they started the company. The business person, who did not know anything to do with technical or anything like that, had that whole idea. Got this technical person, brought them in. Now, what happened was he knew how to, all the connections and whatever of how to bring money in. The tech person was supposed to come in, write the code and build the software and, sell it out. Now, the blunder that happened was the tech person says, no, I really need 50%. This is from the start. And the problem was that 50% that he needed from the start, the guy just stayed there for, I think, a month, then went silent for the next one, did not do anything. Just showed them like a GitHub page and whatever, like, yeah, by then I'm working on this. Didn't do anything, but had already been given 50% of the company before he could do anything. And they had just started. So you can imagine the drama that was happening in this guy getting his ownership back. Became a very long, drawn-out affair, had to bring in lawyers, became a whole court case and whatever. But this is what I'm saying is, don't start by giving 50% or half of the company. Don't start that by the start. Do not do that. So there's usually 2 parts to it. Try as much as possible, no matter how passionate you are, because the problem is when you start out, you always think the person is going to be an angel forever. No, you guys are demons from the start. I apologize for using that one, but you guys are going to be bad, So try and think of the end product and say, hey, when we are starting out, what's the name with this? And I know it sounds like you're being very distrustful when you tell them, let's come up with a vesting share agreement, but you're not. You're really thinking about the long run and the sustainability of the whole company. Hope I've answered you, Moses.
I believe you have. He says, yes, thank you. All right, thank you so much, Frank. I'd now like to invite Roina to give her session. Roina, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Betty.
Okay, great.
Let me just prepare and load my slides.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, cool. Can you see my screen? I don't think you can yet. I don't know.
Not yet.
Can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
I'm using two screens, so cool. Let me just move to a different screen. So have you, okay, there. Can you see my screen now?
No.
Okay, I see what the problem is. Okay, just a minute. I think there's a problem with the permissions. Let me just step out and jump back in and try again. Hello?
Yes. I've made you
Okay.
a co-host, so let's hope it works.
Okay, awesome. So it's just that I hadn't given Zoom permission to access and record my screen.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just granted it and we should be good to go. Now. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yep, we can.
Okay, awesome. Great. So, hey everyone, thank you for joining this session. My name is Rina Ochieng. I'm currently a technical program manager at Microsoft, but I kind of like have worked in PMing for a bit of time now. And before that, I was in developer relations and developer community management. I actually have a slide for that, but I'm like just going off of like an intro. So my background is in computer science. I did a degree in computer science a few years back, and then I spent 3 years in developer communities and developer relations. And then I got into PMing a little over 2 years ago. And so right now I currently work on Microsoft Graph SDKs. Microsoft Graph is this API that Microsoft provides that allows you to get data across all Microsoft 365 applications. So if you use the Microsoft suite, you can like use the graph to just pull information just like with an API across all of them. So I published the SDKs for that particular product. So in the scope of like what PMs do, what product managers do, I would describe it as I find market problems and I guide the creation of the solutions to these problems. And then I lead what efforts go into presenting these solutions to the market. So it's literally those three parts. I find these market problems, I validate them, I break them down, and then I work with engineering to guide the creation of these solutions. And then I also give my insight on how these solutions go to market. So within the scope of what a product manager does, can only just break it down into like 3 bits of things that are completely the central points of focus for PM. One of them is business impact, right? So for example, within my capacity at Microsoft, there are overall organizational goals that we achieve to, and my role is also tied to making sure that these business goals are at the forefront of what leads the efforts that we put into our team. So as much as like Microsoft is like a huge organization, there are these overall like organizational goals that we all strive to achieve. Some of them are like monetary goals. Others are just like way bigger and are more to do with the impact of the company in the overall in the overall ecosystem that the company exists in. And so if you scale this down to just a normal company, then business impact is also on that level. For example, we just came from a talk about co-founders. The co-founders would be the people who come up with what the business impact would look like, right? For example, if you're building a solution that is to impact something like microfinance for farmers, then there has to be goals that the business will have that are tied directly into making changes into that particular ecosystem, which is like microfinance for farmers. So that's a major governing point for PM for PM work, right? Then the next thing is like customer-driven insight. No business exists in a vacuum, and business is only business once it's able to provide a value that a customer or a user can pay for, or like even if it's not a paid for product, it has to provide some value for a specific user. And so customer-driven insight is the ability, like informs the ability for the business to be able to continue to build or continue to provide value tied to the customer it exists in. Like my previous example, if you're building a microfinance solution for farmers, the farmers themselves have to have a say in how the product will evolve. So you can't just like sit in a room and cover yourself and say, if I was a farmer, this would be the product that I would want. Then you would be building a product for yourself. Customer-driven insight would be, this is a market proposal that we have for solving issues for farmers, and we will need insight from the farmers themselves, the people who are building the solution for, to be able to iterate on this product and to be able to make sure that it provides the value that it should. So customer-driven insight is the other thing that informs PM activities. We have to be like really in touch with our customers and use the insights that we get from them on the state of the product and like features that they would like to have and things that they would like the product to do. We have to rely on that to make sure that we're, one, remaining relevant as a solution in the markets that we exist, and two, it acts as really good insight to allow us to keep up with our customer goals. So we don't lose customers because we're not evolving towards their needs. The third thing, which is tied to this definition that I gave on what PMs do, which is guiding the creation of these solutions, has to do with resourcing. And resourcing itself means that there is an amount of time that you're required to deliver a solution. Because I mean, like in a perfect world, we would have an unlimited amount of time before we would want to go to market or provide the solution or start making money from a specific project. But we don't exist in that perfect world. So we have constraints, and these constraints have to do with time and the amount of money and the amount of resources that money can give us. For example, in the startup world, if you needed to provide that microfinance solution for farmers, you would need a timeline on when you would want that product to go to market. And then you'd also need resourcing in terms of like investment. For example, for you to be able to afford a team of 8 engineers to work on actualizing that goal, then you would have to be able to put a price tag on that engineering team. You'd have to put a price tag on certain things that would bring that solution to life. That could be the cloud storage that you need the solution to utilize. That could be the marketing and all of that. All of that we classify as like resourcing and investment. So even sometimes when we talk about resourcing, we're also talking about like engineering capacity, because a team that has 8 engineers will be able to bring or implement solutions faster than a team that is just relying on like 1 engineer. So that in itself is a resource. Even the expertise levels of the engineers itself plays a role in the resources. So if you wanted to bring something to market and you have like 2 senior engineers, of course they would cost you more compared to having a team of 8 interns to be able to bring your product to market. So there's a lot of considerations that go into resourcing, and it's not always monetary, it's always in terms of like what your engineering capacity looks like also for your team. So PM activities typically evolve around these 3 things: business impact, customer-driven insights, and resourcing. And so we have to work across this. When you look at business impact, it means that somewhere in the middle, we have to be able to look at what the top level goals of the business are and like look at the relevance of those goals. And then we'll be the ones to break those goals down and be able to like integrate them into like smaller activities that the team has to do to be able to trickle up to business impact. Then we have to talk to customers a lot because they lead the evolution of their product. Then we also have to interface with resourcing, which is everything from engineering, from the budget that the company has to actualize a goal. So we have to manage those resources too and use them in the best of our abilities and like make sure that we maximize on them. So the reason I'm giving this talk is to be able to equip anyone who is a startup founder or who is trying to kickstart their project to have a few fundamentals that we as PMs use and be able to use these fundamentals to be able to manage their product. I know in the startup level, you're not going to have like an organizational structure like a company that is like fully fledged and fully funded. And so even at that co-founder stage, even at the beginning stages of starting your startup, you might have to fill in multiple shoes so that you're able to build a product for success. And this doesn't mean that you have to have like a lot of technical expertise within for the products that you're building. You could have a good idea, but this is kind of going to be a rubric that can help you manage the life cycle of your product and certain tools and certain skills that you can gather and use to make sure that you are starting off having the right considerations and that you're also starting off in a way that can allow you to manage the entire life cycle of your product for success and for impact. So that being said, knowing all the moving parts that a product manager usually has to have, you can kind of fill in how it looks like for you on a founder, or if you exist in a startup ecosystem, in a startup company. You always have to have an overview of what the overall business goals and the business impact is, which means that to some extent you have to be interfacing with the ecosystem that you exist, right? For us to say that we're building a business that will have impact in a certain ecosystem, we have to have insight within that ecosystem. And the goals of the company need to be directly tied to what that ecosystem is. So if we're talking about microfinance for farmers, we need to have a good understanding of the actual impact that we are hoping to create within that specific space, which is microfinance for farmers, and be able to draft your business goals in relation to what the role of the business will be in that space. Then you also have to be very customer driven. There is no room to huddle yourself in a room and not at least be speaking about your product and speaking to the people who could be potentially be interested in your product. You have to start that early stage and get those customer insights, because these are the things that are going to help you prioritize what to build, because you can't start developing the whole product all at once. Then you have to have resourcing in mind, which I know due to like budgeting and like trying to figure out how much it will take to bring your product to life, you do still already have to have these factors in mind. So then we come to the stuff that we have to do day to day in the product management space that you can do for your particular venture that can help you manage each step of the product lifecycle. So with this in mind, I'm trying to not use any PM jargon. I'm trying to not use a lot of like contextual language here. So I'm just like really trying to give a really broad overview of some of the things that we typically have to do as PMs and like be able to relate it down to your ventures. So if you were to look at a product lifecycle, and if you were to look at it on a very high level without breaking it down in terms of different methodologies that product managers use to manage the product lifecycle, you could split it into like 3 different stages. There's that first stage, which is the planning stage. Then there's the resourcing and the investment, and then there's the go-to-market. And if you woke up today and you were like, I have this idea, I want to be able to actualize it, the first stage that you'll fall into is planning. And that planning stage is, has to be pretty methodological. Like it has to be very, very laid out, right? And so if we were to think of planning itself, we can use a use case, right? So I know I've been talking about farmers microfinance, but I have a more actionable use case here, which is like, for example, I woke up in the morning and I decided that I wanted to build a food recommendation app. And maybe this is just based off of a problem that I go through every day, because a lot of us, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startups are, they arise from day-to-day problems, which I always think is a really great space to be at if your business impact is informed by a problem that you also encounter. So a few friends of mine have been thinking about building an app that does food recommendations. We don't want to go to a restaurant and have to look at 6 pages of a menu before we're able to decide which item that we want to pick out of the menu. And we also want to use the insights. We also have friends who maybe are in the restaurant space who would want to know insights on what are the most commonly ordered items, what are the most common allergies, what are the most common dislikes in food, so that we're able to give them that insight and allow them to make menus more informed and more considerate based off of those insights. So if that's my idea, I have to go through this planning stage. This planning stage requires market research. It requires a little bit of design thinking and impact scoping and architectural considerations. I'll dive a little bit deeper into this when it comes to something that we do called question storming and brainstorming. Brainstorming is usually centered around a problem, but question storming is a more open-ended way of brainstorming, which would be like you'd open a Google Doc and type down each and every question you would potentially have about this new solution. For example, how do we get user data? That's a question. How do we get people to log in? Is this going to be valid to the market? Literally any open-ended question. There's no dumb question, there's no good question, there's no bad question. Any single question that you could possibly have about this solution, you put it on a question storming doc. What this does is it allows you to be able to attack the solution in terms of gaps. So yeah, we do know that what we want to bring to the table is a food recommendation app, but what are the gaps? What are the knowns and the unknowns that we have when it comes to this solution? Question storming opens you up to be able to see all potential gaps, all potential considerations. And this question storming doc can actually end up becoming a very vital tool to guide one of these items, which is like the market research item. For example, if we're going in there and there's a lot of questions around who our users are, what value they're going to derive from this solution. We have a question there around what demographic we're targeting. We're targeting millennials between age this and this, what income. So once you get this question storming doc and you start to fill in the gaps, it starts to fill in big gaps and even small gaps around what your market looks like and what your solution looks like. So it's helpful to do this with your co-founder or even with your team, where you all just jump on a doc and ask all potential questions. I've been in question storming sessions that have like given birth to like 100 and something questions. And that question storming doc really shows you where the major gaps lie and what huge differences what huge gaps exist within the solution that you have in mind. Once you put this down, success at this stage looks like having an overview of a problem statement. In writing business plans, there is that first stage of the business plan where people tell you to have a problem statement or to have a descriptive problem statement. That can be a very daunting task when you haven't already gone through the process of exploring what gaps you're trying to fill for your users, when you haven't even gone through the process of identifying who your user is. It's going to be a very daunting task, and you're not really going to have a problem statement that you can use to refer as a grounding mark of how the product is evolving, because that's what a problem statement is supposed to do. We're supposed to constantly look back at the problem statement and ask ourselves, are we investing in the problem that we have set out to solve? And if your problem statement doesn't cover the problem you're solving for your users, then it's not really an effective problem statement. So if you go through this question storming session and it opens you up to seeing the gaps within identifying your users or what solution your product is going to evolve, you should have a really good, strong overview of what your problem statement is going to look like. Then you should also have a good overview of the solution and the value propositions that you're going to have on your customers, right? So this is like a draft. This is a draft of what my question storming session with my friends was. So we're building this food app and we wanted to be able to provide recommendations. And then we also wanted to provide, we wanted to provide like value to restaurants also. So at that point, we've already identified which true users we're going to have within this app. And then we're able to look at what exactly is the problem here that we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve analysis paralysis. We're trying to have a place where we can be able to recommend people's meals based off of whatever their network plus ones or thumbs downs on restaurants they visit. And then it actually went so deep that we're able to actually come up with specific features that are value adds that you can tell this particular user we are going to provide you with. For example, we're telling this user who is the foodie that we're going to provide you with network-based recommendations, which will link with your network and will tell you who tried and trusted this thing, and they're able to give you a recommendation that this meal at this restaurant is great. If we go to the restaurant side, we're talking about, okay, if you sign up your restaurant on this app, we'll be able to give you accessibility to feedback. We'll be able to give you insight on what demographic likes what certain meals in your restaurant and how you can market that better to that demographic. And so the outcome of our question storming session should give you a good direction on which way to go with your market research. It also gives you a good it gives you a good direction on how user flows are going to look like, because here you can say, how does a user flow to access recommendations on our users network going to look like? We've already identified that this is something that they will want to have as a value proposition. So then we can actually go into a user flow and say, okay, if we were to have an MVP, how would this look like for a user? Because we already also know the value that that feature is going to provide, and we already also know what we need to do to provide that. So it's going to give you a good direction for where your market research is going to go, how your user flows are going to look like, and it's going to give a good foundation for your design thinking. Design thinking is using problem statements to be able to guide the solutions for those problems. And it's also going to give a good stepping stone for architectural considerations. So if you're working with a technical product and you want to bring in a technical founder from the beginning, this is a good place to tell them, hey, this solution is going to require us to collect network data from social media sites. What do we need to consider in terms of costs and in terms of privacy considerations? Like when we're talking about insights for menu customizations, what kind of data do we need to be collecting from users from the get-go, and how do we facilitate that within our product development cycle? So yeah, that's kind of like a good activity I would recommend people to do during the planning stages. Question storm, identify those gaps, and then have specific deliverables, which are these items that I pointed out from that activity. Then when it comes to like resourcing and investment, right? Here we're talking about what are our available resources, how will they be distributed, and how best do we utilize these resources, and how do we prioritize? So for this food app of ours, we see that there's a bunch of items that we want to provide here. We're aiming for an MVP. So how do we go about figuring out what to include in that MVP? The first stage the first thing we're gonna do here is probably want to do some market research to validate whether these things that we have on the question storming is actually valid to the customers that we're trying to impact, right? So we have all these features here. How do we make sure that we're providing impact? How do we make sure that we're bringing forward something that's actually going to be useful? We're going to have to do a little bit of market research here, right? We're going to have to do some market research to validate, okay, how legitimate is this going to be for smaller restaurants? How are we going to be able to present this feedback in a way that is valuable to the restaurant people? How are we going to be able to gather information on diet restrictions and stuff, right? So we need to pick a struggle here. So that's when resourcing and investment comes in. When you talk about resourcing and investments, you have to think about what the pitfalls here are. One thing that I've worked, before joining Microsoft, I worked with a couple of other startups, and I think some of the gaps that I identified when it comes to resourcing and investments were on a founder level, were these that I have highlighted here, right? The usual blockers are, one, at this stage where you've gathered all this insight, you want to start implementing. You want to go ahead and you want to start like you want to open Android Studio and start an app and start like putting stuff on that app. That's a huge, huge gap because you still don't have proper requirements for each and every one of these things. So it ends up snowballing into like a huge, huge, huge item, right? If you go in there and you try and like build out this app as is, before you've broken down all of these items into specific requirements and specific deliverables, then it becomes a little bit hard to chew. It's like really trying to fit like a whole loaf of bread into your mouth. So you take a step back and you look at each individual feature after you've already validated the value that this is going to have. So if you're working with a technical founder, their strong suit might not be going ahead and looking at whether or not these items will be valid for the specific groups that we're targeting as users or that we've identified as users. So this is a great time to bring in someone non-technical or somebody who has insight on research, or even this is a great job for a non-technical founder to do in terms of validation. And then we have to break it down into small chunkable bits. So when it comes to like network-based recommendations, requirements for that specific feature could be something like allow the user to log in using Facebook, and then we go ahead and pull their friends list there and show them who has used this app and which meals they recommend. So you have to break it down into smaller biteable bits. And that means don't jump straight into implementation. Some of the biggest bits of starting off technical products lies in the level of detail that you invest in by planning stage. And this will also allow you to see how big the project will be in terms of resourcing. How much will you require? How much effort, how much time, and how much engineering capacity will you require at each stage and for each feature? So before you jump into implementation as a founder, make sure that you have a good enough overview of what the features entail, and actually spend a bit of time during the planning stage and breaking those things down into requirements. Another pitfall is rapid iteration, right? You start building this app and then you have this MVP and you're in this stage where the problem here is you start rapidly iterating with the ideas that you think are good, right? So you've gone in there, you're like, I have this app, I want users to start using it. And once users start using it, then I will know what to do on the app. So that means that you get into this cycle where you are waiting for user feedback to inform this next stage of your app. When if you started off with small chunkable bits of this project, you would be able to iterate at each stage. For example, you can have the most basic version of network-based recommendations, which will be just allow the users to log in and see which of their friends are on Dishi. You get users to start sampling just that one thing, and then you iterate on it instead of trying to rapidly iterate on what the whole solution looks like. So there's a lot of testing that goes on here. And there's a lot of really, really deliberate engineering methodologies that you have to use so that you're not stuck in this rapid iteration stage. And that's how you end up with apps that have 55 features, right? Have you ever like downloaded, let me think of an app that I was just mind blown. Do you remember like when Jumia tried to put the Jumia marketplace and the Jumia food app in one app? And then there was like, you're looking for the food, but somehow you're also seeing advertisements on shoes and tools, like nuts, because it can really snowball into a stage where they're like, okay, so we have a lot of people looking for tools, and this app, we can also shop for tools on it. So let's start marketing tools, but maybe I'm a customer who's downloaded the app so that I can only get like food deliveries from it. So you have to, the rapid iteration has to be very deliberate. You have to be able to use specific methodologies to get to the end of the life of the product life cycle before you can iterate. And then, and just tied to the last 2 points, drowning in scope, trying to implement everything at the same time makes it seem like a very impossible task, and it makes it very difficult to gauge progress when you're trying to do everything at the same time. Requirements is the other thing that we don't spend enough time in, and requirements doesn't just mean the requirements when it comes to the user experience, it also goes into the requirements that go into what engineering will be implementing. Then having an everything salad is being the type of co-founder who is the technical co-founder, but you're also the marketing expert, but you're also the business development expert, but you also did a finance course a while ago, so you're also the finance manager. And then you're also somehow the person who goes to client meetings to talk about to talk about stuff. Doing all of that in a very unplanned way makes it an everything salad, and it makes it really, really difficult to make sure that your product life cycle is managed in a way where your product is, is equipped for success. For non-technical founders, MVPs being the blocker to customer engagement, you're not starting to have the conversation about the product with customers until you have something solid that they can download, can be a pitfall, because this stage of planning that we mentioned, market validation, market research, design thinking, impact scoping, requires customer engagement. So starting to have those conversations on a very high level, that without the outcome of, hey, here, download our app, or here, visit our website, is also very important. So there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. So using the MVP as a blocker to start customer engagement can really rob you of a lot of insights that can help you decide of all these features, which ones you really want to implement. Those conversations can inform whether you pick demographic insights and this for your MVP. So those conversations need to start rolling from the beginning. Non-technical founders not being involved in the design implementation, in the design part of the product is also a really huge pitfall. So you have to be able to have a team that can check bias. For example, as an engineer, I might think a specific implementation is going to be easier or it's going to be very straightforward. You do need a team that is able to check bias and is able to hold each other accountable on customer-driven insights. So as the design keeps evolving, the non-technical team that is constantly facing customers or that is constantly working on what the brand is going to look like needs to remain informed on the progress of the implementation. Then brand-informed design. This is something that I see a lot of people doing where you're like, we're building an Uber-like app, or we're building a Glovo-like app. Using this brand mentality where the brand leads the effort that the product is going to take is very problematic because it makes you lose sight of what the initial problem statement is. So if your problem statement is identical to Uber, then you need to figure out what distinct value adds does your application have that sets it apart from Uber. Not really in the way where you want to stand out, but in a way where you can clearly distinguish what your problem statement is based off of the market or the customer you're trying to serve. So using brand-informed design means that you will start, a huge part of your implementation is going to be trying to catch up to the design standard of the brand you are trying to aspire to. So you will be like, let's implement all the features that Uber has, and then start implementing the things that will set us apart from Uber. And you can't really do that because, again, we're talking about resourcing and investment, and you really can't afford to be wasting your resourcing with catching up to feature implementations for a competitor compared to actually building the things that will drive customers into your product. Then also working with assumptions. We try to say, like, for example, this question storming session that I just spoke about is highly, highly based on assumptions. We're here assuming that people want restaurant recommendations based on their preferences, or people don't like going to a restaurant and looking at menus. We can't work with assumptions because that means that we're using our most vital resource, which is time, working with assumptions. And we do need to spend a lot more resourcing and investments validating these assumptions. So if we're going ahead and thinking that, oh my gosh, this logo is going to look great, don't spend time building the logo that you think will look great. Spend time validating the assumptions that you have on what will affect customer conversions more. So yeah, that's what I can say for resourcing and investment. And then the other part that I don't really want to go very deep into because we do have a whole subset of product management, which is product marketing management. There's like a huge part of this that you can really, really go deep into, but I'm not going to really go into it too much. And I'm going to talk about specifically tapping into research, testing, and iteration, right? As I've said, we can't remain in a bubble where we think that the product is going to market fully fledged and people will pick it up. We have to have very data-centered iteration, and we also need to be doing research and testing, right? Testing leads to informed iteration. So if you have an MVP, or even if you have like a group of people, there's like very simple tactics that companies use to get user feedback. For example, for our food recommendation app, we can easily go with an MVP, or we can easily go with a slide deck into a Java and talk to people and be like, hey, would you press this button? Would you actually work on this app? How would you do this part differently? How would you want to see recommendations? Just very simple stuff which are called like coffee break sessions, where you can offer someone to buy, someone a coffee in exchange for customer feedback for your app. That kind of testing, and that being very data centered, and you having prepared a set of questions and a set of outcomes you would like to achieve in your testing, means that when you go back to your app and you choose to change a feature, or you choose to change how the app looks, it's informed and it's data centered, and you're not making an assumption. You've actually spoken to customers, and this is something that will work better for them. Then you have to remain data driven. Assumptions really kill innovation, because you have to stand on a set of data, on a block of data that will actually allow you to make informed decisions. Because at the end of the day, we're working with resourcing and investments, our most valuable resource being time, and our most valuable investments being the people who are working on these products. So you do need to remain data-driven, because at the same time, you do need to be delivering very clear goals to the rest of your team that actually sit on some data, not just your imagination or your vision for how the product is going to evolve as a founder. Then investing in remaining customer-driven. Having those conversations, remaining very high touch at early stages of the product really yields, because you not only end up building customer relationships, you're also incrementally building on the data that you are gathering and validating and ensuring the longevity in terms of iteration of your product. So when I joined product management, I got this book called The Secret Product Manager Handbook, and the author, Niels Davis, says that there are a few things that are the makings of a great product manager. And if you're in early stage development of your product, you're probably also an unclaimed product manager, because of all the stuff that you have to manage that I just mentioned in terms of the product lifecycle. And how to be able to pull this off requires a certain set of skills. And a lot of this is a lot of context switching, because 1 minute you're thinking about the market, 1 minute you're thinking about engineering and what needs to be done there, 1 minute you're constantly planning for the next thing. So you're going to need mental agility. Context switching is something that is not taught in school. It's something that you don't read a book about. There are things that help people manage this process a little bit better, but mental agility just means that you have to work the muscle that allows you to remain on top of all the moving parts. As PMs, like on average in my day, I have like a set of maybe 12 meetings, and they all have different contexts. And so you have to develop the muscle to switch contexts, to remain on top of things. You have to be able to communicate and ask questions, because that's how you're going to be able to manage the mental agility part. It's a muscle, it needs to be worked. And so if it doesn't come naturally for you in your first venture, I think that's, people who've been in that co-founder and founder state just build that muscle with time. So maybe also seeking advice on that context switching from people who have come before you will definitely help. Technical credibility is also extremely important when you're building a product. Be it you are a non-technical or a technical PM, some kind of technical credibility needs to apply. As we had on the previous talk, for you to be a co-founder or for you to be a founder, there's a set of skills you bring to the table, right? So whether you have a very deep technical perspective of how a certain space works, that technical credibility needs to be in place, and it needs to be functional. So not that you are somebody who worked at a restaurant 12 years ago, so you think you know the restaurant business. You need to have that credibility validated through very recent encounters with people in the space that you're innovating for, or you need to still be consistently working in that space and interacting with the factors that will affect the success of your product. So that technical credibility is a huge part. Communication might be one of the biggest things, because a lot of all the things we are doing in all these steps that we've mentioned in the slides are tied to being able to provide clarity and a unified goal. As we said on like the first slides here, there's the three moving parts of the fundamentals, right? The business impact, the customer-driven insight, and the resourcing. At every point, it requires a very high level and deep level of communication that allows you to be able to trickle down actual stuff to the teams that you're leading. So whether it's engineering has to have a very clear overview of what the business impact is, what the customers are saying in terms of the experience they're having on the product, what resourcing, how resourcing affects customers, and how resourcing affects our business impact. All these things require a very clear level of communication. And this happens in terms of, sorry for switching slides, but this happens a lot because as the leader of the product, as the product owner, you'll hear people calling product managers product owners. You are the bearer of the goal. So you are the person who walks into the room and is constantly iterating the business impact. It's constantly reiterating what the customers need and what insights we have from the customers. And we're also going up and saying, we can't deliver version 1 of this product that we know customers need within X number of days, because this is how our resourcing looks like. So that communication, your ability to communicate, is really, really fundamental. And, you know, people think communication is just the words that we use, but it goes deeper into how we use those words, when we choose to use those words. So there's a lot of resources that can aid you in terms of leadership, communication for leadership, communication for like daily management of tasks. There's a lot of resources that you can like really go into to understanding this communication bit of the product management process. Empathy is your ability to be able to relate to the problems across all the different stages of the life cycle. So you have to be able to empathize with the problems that the customers are bringing forward. You also have to be able to empathize with the resources and the team that you're in. And empathy itself opens the door to evaluating the biases that we have. There's very many different types of biases that we can have. Some biases make us lean to different implementations of solutions for problems. So we always have to remain objective, and we always have to check whether the decisions we're making or the way we are communicating facilitates some of the biases that are instilled in us with time and based off of experience and based off of our backgrounds. Then I mean, like when you're in a position of leadership or management, it's really easy when you have that power to be the final say. It's very easy to be very opinionated and to pass down decisions based off of what you think is the best thing to happen. And so you have to be opinionated but flexible. So opinionated but flexible means that if valid reasons are brought to the table, you should be able to change your mind based off of fact and data. As we said in the previous slides, remaining data-driven is so fundamental. So we consistently have to make sure that if things are being brought to the table that are data-driven and data-based, and whether they are valid and we can validate them, we should be able to change our stance. And then growth mindset is a whole other topic that people even have to do like higher degrees on. And growth mindset just means seeing problems not as blockers, but seeing them as opportunities for growth. So we're at a place where we're like, oh, we don't have enough resources. We don't see that as, oh my gosh, we don't have enough resources. There's nothing we can do about this solution now. We see it as, how can we become creative with the resources that we have at hand to be able to achieve the goal. So growth mindset means that you do not, you look at items and you look at blockers and problems as stepping stones to do things differently and to iterate on things and think creatively and be open to change and be open to feedback and constantly evolving. So that is my last slide. I feel like I've like wrapped through it, but I was also trying to keep time. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now and see if there's any questions in the chat or if anyone has any questions in the last few minutes of my presentation. I don't know if I don't think I can see the chat. But yeah, anyone with any questions, feel free.
Yes, I have a question to Ms. Roina.
Sure, Caleb.
Yeah, you talked about making your, product, or your idea known to your customers. But will it be hard, for example, if you are in the B2B business, you want to sell to your product to another business, will it be much easier for you to see you with a working prototype than, just trying to ask them about their needs and you don't have any prototype? Thank you.
I think there's like there's various ways to manage that problem, right? Because one, we have to think of the life cycle of the product as an actual life cycle, right? So early stage product, which is like the market research and validation stage, it's a very, 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 very deliberate process you have to go through, right? For example, that question storming session that I just talked about, if there are specific gaps within your knowledge of the market, then you're going to approach the customer with the intent to fill those gaps, right? When you move further down the product life cycle onto the go-to-market strategy, then that's definitely going to need to be taking a product to market, right? So I do think that there's very creative ways that you can use to engage with customers during the validation stage. But the trick here is to be very, very deliberate about the outcomes of the conversations you're leading, right? It might not be, hey, let me pitch you an idea. It might be, hey, you are the HR manager of a company. I would probably want to pitch this product to. Do you have 10 minutes to discuss some of the problems that you encounter with XYZ? And because I'm trying to build a solution around that, like early days in some of the startups I've worked on, we have had very receptive customers, and it might not just be for the specific customers you're looking to pitch this to. Like, we're living in such a great global village right now that you could actually speak to people implementing these solutions in other countries, or you can actually speak to someone who could have this problem in other ecosystems. So one thing to keep in mind within that market validation stage is that the world is your oyster, and you can decide to get your market insight however you choose to. So it be conversations, it be LinkedIn polls. You can conduct polls on your Twitter and see what kind of responses you have. There's like so many different creative ways you can do to get market insight before you have an MVP. But one thing I would say, if you're building a product for the local ecosystem, do not restrict yourself with going like, I say, I'm building a solution for Textbook Center, so I would need to talk to Textbook Center as a customer. No, you can actually go and be like, I'm going to talk to somebody who has a bookstore in Tokyo or something that doesn't have a language barrier, and see if the solution I'm building could apply for that. Because at the end of the day, you're not building a localized product. Like, if you build, most people start with localized products and then scale up, but you can always start with a very global product and then localize it if it's need be. So I think development can also take that way of like thinking, just like a globalized way. I hope that helps, Caleb.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any tips for startups on handling product vision and direction conflicts? Okay, my biggest tip with that, because like I think 90% of the meetings as a PM I go to are to clarify product vision and make sure that everybody is on the exact same page. There is an uncomfortable level of transparency and communication that is required for this, right? Like, the one thing that even though I'm like early stage in my product career, the biggest feedback I've received is over communicating. And over communicating is not just sharing the information that is relevant to the relevant parties. It is sharing way more than the relevant information. Like, here is our thinking around this. So I know we decided on this direction, but these are all the considerations that were put on the table before we choose to change direction. And it requires a very, very certain, like, uncomfortable level of like communication, where it's like, there's an accountability that needs to be taken on. And I think for the team that I currently work with, that level of accountability is what has helped a lot in handling product vision, because it takes top level management to say, hey, I remain accountable in leading the team in this direction. This direction has proven to not be effective. Here is why. I take full responsibility for that. Here's how I suggest we move forward. And this is like including all the team members to say, are we all on board for this product direction change? And what are the considerations we should make? Because sometimes I've realized, like, when there's a change in product vision or direction, the initial pushback is very shock value. It's like, no, but we were doing this all along, and we've done this for 6 months. Why are we doing it differently? And it's actually creating spaces where expressing that kind of like disgruntlement is allowed, but then also making sure that that disgruntlement isn't noise, and that people are bringing forward feedback that actually could affect the direction moving forward. So there's tools to use for that, but a lot of it, I would say, is having a team culture that is extremely transparent. And a lot of it is also to do with having a certain level of accountability throughout the entire team. And the biggest thing is over communicating at every stage. Over communicating is also not a one-time thing where we only come forward and communicate when something has gone wrong or when the direction is taking a 360. It means really having really communicating even at the smaller stages of, hey, we've been having conversations about this. Things might change based off of our findings, but this is where we're having these conversations and this is the direction we're going. It's so idealistic to think that that should be how we run products or how we move products, but it's in itself very complex when it comes to the implementation of it. And a lot of it is to do with team culture, which is like a whole different struggle. I know you know that, Frank. Like, just building a conducive team culture that allows that level of communication is literally the hardest part. But yeah, just based off of my experiences, that's what I would say has been helpful so far.
I think we'll take one last question because we still have Eric's presentation to go through.
Yeah.
Moses, I see you have unmuted yourself, so maybe you have a question or a comment.
Maybe it was like accidental.
Okay, yeah, I've seen he said no. All right, thank you so much, Raina. Are you going to stick around or?
Yeah, I will stick around for a bit. I've also dropped my presentation in the chat for anyone who would be interested in like iterating on it or like comments. Yeah, but I'll be around to the end of the session, I think, or until 1.
All right, thank you so much. Eric, hi, are you able to share your screen with us?
Yes, I am able to share my screen. Just one moment. All right, can everyone see it?
Yes.
Super. All right, great. So thanks so much, Betty, for the opportunity to be able to share some of my insights and some of my thoughts around technical sales. It's always lovely, like Raina was saying, to work with engineers and to work with individuals with a technical background, because again, the one thing that you get to see is that very linear thinking and execution as well. And I think the one great thing that we can learn from selling and selling at scale, especially selling at scale of technical products, is that it has to be a concerted effort. It can't be a one individual sort of like job. It has to be every player within the organization getting involved in actively selling and pushing product. And so those are some of the things that I hope to tackle in this presentation. It's quite short, it's about 6 slides, and we'll have more conversation as we go by. So great. So when you're thinking about selling a very a technical product, and a very technical product in that case, the very first thing that every individual or every organization needs to do is think about the messaging. So who are we? And that can mean a lot of things. So what's our market space? What's our profile? What are we trying? What challenge are we trying to solve? At the same time, trying to identify your core values, your mission statements, and at the same time, identify your products and services and what you bring to the table. This is akin to your value proposition. And this can mean a lot of things. For instance, if you are looking to build a solution, a solution within the circular economy space. So for instance, something such as plastic recycling. So you have to try and think of your space and your industry. What is the grander scheme of things? What's the grandest challenge that you're looking to solve, and how are you looking to solve it? What is the end product, and what are you looking towards offering the market? And whatever you're looking to offer the market, where is your key value addition? Because I believe if the core of the product or the core of the solution is technical, or is a technology solution that you're looking to provide, then you have to try and identify what efficiencies you're looking to introduce into your process, or what savings in terms of time, cost, energy you're looking to bring in, and obviously trying to create that and showcase that as the main selling point of it. And so the messaging is at the very core of whatever you're trying to do. So let's potentially just dive a little bit into that. And one of the things that I have seen, and one of the things that I advise mostly, is about understanding your industry, your products, and your services. So buckle it up and down and try and understand your industry from whatever space that you're in. So again, going back to that example of plastic recycling. So what is it that you're looking to offer at the end of the day? If you're looking to do value addition, for instance, in agriculture, what industry is this and what product is this? And because it gives you a very narrow focus and helps you identify what you want to do. Then the second thing that I would advise is around creating revenue events around each activity that you do. So what do I mean by this? If you're looking to, for instance, again, do value addition to an agricultural product, there's obviously some very many processes that are involved. So one is the crushing of the product. So from that, what byproduct do we get out of it? And can we create revenue out of that? So if you move to the next stage of actual processing of the products from the extraction process, what do we get out of it? So try and create and try and turn each and every activity, each and every other efficiency that your product is looking to offer, and try and turn each one of them into an event that can make money for the company. So whether it's selling the byproducts, whether it's the efficiencies, whether it's a cost savings, each and every other one of those things should make money. Then the third and final thing is about deepening domain expertise. So the one thing that I consistently state about selling technical products, or being a company that is creating technical products, is you have to remain ahead of the game much faster than everyone else. Your game and your space is innovation. Your game, your space is efficiency. So the one way that you can be able to extract more value, both for your customers and for your product and for your process flow, is by getting OCD with your product and getting OCD with your process flow. So try as much as possible to cascade and deeply create new ways of doing it. So for instance, again, going back to the recycling example. So if it's the mortars that you use in your flow, what's the most efficient way of doing it? If it's for instance part of your crushers, how and what's the most efficient way of making them better? If it's your grinders, what's the best way of making them much more much more accurate and much more intense. And so the more domain expertise you build about your production, the more domain expertise you build about your process flow, the easier it gets to you, and the more efficiency you see, and the more you realize, and the easier, again, it becomes to sell your product. So the other interesting thing that I would say about building technical products is a lot of them have to be very tailor-made for your customers. So you have to list the products or services your company provides and how they will help the customer achieve their objectives. So be it in your marketing strategy, market entry strategy, be it in your product brand launch, be it in your competitive intelligence data, be it in your market analysis. So you have to ensure that each and every one of these parameters intersect and offer a very narrow and a very specific solution to a very specific problem. So then if that's the case, how do you create a technical sales process? So the very first thing for me is the prospecting and lead generation. So again, you're not selling an FMCG product. You're not selling solution that is consumed by every single individual every day. So with that, you have to, again, you have to narrow and prospect in a way that makes sense for your product and your solution. Then the next thing that I advise mostly is planning the sales call. So you have to define your pre-sale support. For example, the engineers that you're going to work with internally and within and from your customer. Try as much as possible to map out the process. Try as much as possible to gather as many requirements that you envision once you in your prospecting and in your lead generation stage, such that it helps the planning of the sales call a bit narrow and a bit efficient. Then the next thing is obviously the meetings and the demos, where you get to showcase how you envision the solution solves a problem for your customer. And then much more critical during the demos is to try as much as possible to do something called active listening. This is your customer inadvertently says things that are critical to your process flow and are critical to your sales process. So they will say, for instance, look, whatever you're looking to offer us might be already in existence within our organization, but we're facing this other challenge. So during the demo and the process flow, see how your solution that you're offering meets some of the current requirements of the customer or any other untold requirements by the customer. They consistently state them. Then after that is now the post-demo follow-ups. This is obviously the very long process because clients, particularly buying technical products, tend to have very long sales cycles. So you're looking between 3 to potentially a year and a half before they actually take up a solution. So you have to ensure that you identify something called an ICP, an ideal customer profile internally. So this is your champion within the organization who will try and push for both the product and at the same time try and notify and identify the appropriate internal resources that are needed towards bringing and making the product, and making your sale come to life. Much more importantly, during this phase is to try and ensure that you have a lot of processes moving in parallel. What do I mean by this? So during the meetings, demos, and even the follow-ups, you need to have very prerequisite documents. For instance, an MOU document. So during that first meeting, make sure you send that out. An NDA document, make sure you send that out, because what it does is it lowers your journey and it lowers that sales cycle, which ideally would be, say, 6 to 1.5 years, and already lowers it to because some of those documents have already been sent out. And so now your focus becomes towards making the sale and actually getting onboarded within the customer. So I would advise that some of these things happen in parallel. The other critical thing that needs to happen during the post-demo follow-ups is, I would advise, particularly for technical solutions, is a workshop. So this is aimed at getting all the players within the organizations who will be interacting with the solution onto one table, getting to discuss your solution, getting to discuss how you envision it solving their problems, and try and get both the technical and non-technical team members buy-in during that stage. It really helps, again, during the post-demo follow-ups. And once that's done, you also need to now start actively thinking about documentation. So once the customer purchases your solution, so how do they solve their problems internally? How do they how do they, for instance, troubleshoot it? How do they, for instance, try and mitigate whatever problems they could have, and try and come up with that documentation during that period in time. And then the final stage is obviously the sign-off, which is you signing on the dotted line. So in summary, I've tried to rush through everything that I wanted to talk about. So one is to know the key benefits provided by the product or the service that you're promoting or offering. Understand them, be OCD about the details. Every technical detail matters, and every process flow matters. Then the next thing that you need to do is know your customer. So do thorough preparation and research, as Reina was stating. So try and understand, how does this organization work? Who are the key decision makers? Who makes the purchasing decisions? What teams will my product and or solution intersect with? How does that relate with my current process flow? So try and understand your customer flows, both the internal journeys, the decision makers, the current technical flows, and how that looks like. At the same time, try and understand your competition, because ideally there's nothing new on this earth, literally. Most organizations tend to have a lot of legacy technology and a lot of legacy solutions internally. And so try and understand your competition and try and understand what are your weaknesses. So if you're looking to, for instance, offer a solution that is geared towards energy savings, try and understand what's currently available in the market, and whatever is available in the market, what better way have you been able to do, or have you been able to improve on the current flows, and try and make that your very, very good unique selling point. Then the other critical thing that you need to understand is timing. So I'll give an example with over the last 1 year, we've seen a lot of organizations try to think about digital transformation, both industrial, from an industrial perspective, and even from a software level. So try and make sure that your timing is right, and then try and make sure that whenever you're going to showcase a solution, whenever you're going to try and sell your product, that it tallies well with the timings of within that organization. The other critical thing about timing is you need to understand the sales cycles of some of these organizations. So for the smaller companies, they do not care about budgets, and well, they do care about budgets, but they do not have to ensure that they have allocations at the beginning of the year for them to happen. So my advice is begin early. If you're looking towards closing a sale in the last quarter of the year, by Q4, make sure that your conversations are already beginning in Q1, Q2, actually even earlier than that, so that you have that entire process flow marked and created, such that by the time the customer is making the purchasing decision in the fourth quarter of the year, they already made that requisition within their budget, or they already have you in mind. So make sure that a lot of those timings and teething problems are very well resolved. And then finally is track and adjust. So again, I did state about being OCD about your product and your solution, but at the same time, this entire process flow within your sales process, track it and try and create it in multiple segments. So is it the lead generation phase, which we showcased? Is it the prospecting and lead generation phase that is the longest, or is it the planning of the sales call that is long? So try and track each and every other step. Get down to the nitty-gritties and say, ideally, after a quarter, you should be able to say, within our organization, it takes maybe 3 months to close a deal, or it takes X number of weeks to close a deal. And for that, our prospecting and lead generation and getting a sales pipeline takes X amount of time. The planning, sales calls takes X amount of time. The demo and installation takes X amount of time. So that helps you as you grow your organization and as you scale to have an understanding of how of where lapses and where you need to improve. Then the other most critical thing is to consistently ensure that you adjust your process based on whatever learnings you get. So if you were pitching your solution with a certain specific mindset, or trying to solve a specific product problem within an organization, try and see what lapses you hadn't thought about, or what lapses you didn't identify, and try and rejig your solution and readjust the solution to meet those new challenges or new ideas that you keep hearing within your sales process. The same thing applies to within your sales flow. Consistently try and rework it to ensure that you build maximum efficiency. Yeah, so I believe I have tried to summarize everything in the shortest time possible, given our timings, and I now welcome any questions and any comments. Any questions, comments? All right. Seems there are none, so for sure, thank you.
I don't have a question. I just think that was really nice. I learned a lot. Yeah, really good job, Derek. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have a question. Hello, hope you can hear me.
Sure, please.
So my question is concerning a scenario whereby maybe in order for you to scale as a startup, you need a partnership that requires you to integrate with other system. For example, a case like NCBA Bank with Safaricom to come up with M-Shwari. So in such kind of scenarios, what is the best approach to ensure that that partnership goes successfully in terms of integration of the systems and also ensuring that the intellectual capacity that the startup that is merging maybe with a more higher company is still maintained, and the vision also of the startup is still maintained?
Very good question. So I'll give this. I'll give a personal experience that I had. So I did in what year was this? In 2016. We were 3 co-founders, and we were trying to build this very out of the box ad tech solution, and it worked quite well. The solution worked quite well, but then in terms of customer groups, we realized that we needed, for us to be able to scale, we needed to have some very sort of like high level partnerships, which were very, very difficult for us to be able to access in that period in time. So my one advice, Kevin, is start small. It doesn't hurt, because what starting small, particularly with very smaller companies or smaller organizations, is one, it gives you agility in the sense that their requirements might not be as strict as some of those larger companies that you just stated. And the second thing is it gives you credibility and a proof that indeed your solution is credible. Because at the end of the day, some of these larger organizations want to know, who else have you done this with? Who else have you worked with? And the more credibility you build with the smaller companies, the easier it becomes for you, and the much more confidence you have in your product. Then the third thing that I would confidently say is working with larger companies is obviously great because of the kind of revenue numbers and the kind of credibility that they give you. But then they are brutal. They have very, very long sales cycles. That's one. And then second of all is they tend to think that they can build anything for themselves internally. So my one advice is, if there's likely smaller company or a smaller player that you could potentially pilot your solution with, get that credibility, get that confidence in the problem that you're looking to solve, then before presenting it to a much larger context, then the better and easier it is for you to be able to do that. That's one. Second of all, and I firmly believe this, I don't think there's any solution out there that is not honestly available. So for instance, if you're thinking about doing something with Safaricom in IoT, you have companies such as, say, Africa Stocking that have the APIs to build IoT related solutions. If you're thinking about, for instance, banking solutions, then you have companies such as Flutterwave and Cellulant, for instance, who have the APIs for you to be able to integrate and build for that use case. So, well, it might be great to go to that very large organization for the credibility and for the muscle. It might not be great in terms of you, for your time, for your resources, and for your energy. So my advice is start small, build for lower use cases, and then percolate up from there, and then be able to scale. I hope I answered that correctly.
Sure thing. Thank you. I think I've gotten the answers, and I'll put it into practical application.
For sure. And I mean, if you need any help, please feel free to reach out to Betty. She can share my details, and then we can just go through your entire model, particularly how you envision the partnerships to be, and if there are any critical introductions that you need made, I'm more than happy to make that happen for you.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric.
Any other questions? I mean, and again, just like Raina stated, if you need any help thinking through your business model, thinking through your sales structure, please feel free to reach out to me. I may not have all the time in the world, but I am sure I can spare 10 to 30 minutes to just have a conversation about how you envision your flows and what's the easiest way for you to be able to make money for your company.
Okay, seems there are no more questions. Thank you so much, Eric, for facilitating that session. I'm sure everyone has been able to pick up a thing or two. Like Eric mentioned, I'm in a position to provide contact details to Frank, Raina, and Eric should you need to consult them further. And we've been recording this session on YouTube thanks to our partnership with Melanin Capital, i.e. the people who are facilitating the sessions yesterday. So in case you need to listen to the presentations again, you can find them on their YouTube channel, and I should be able to share these details with you on email should you need more clarification. Thank you so much for attending this session. I know we are 13 minutes past the hour, but thank you again for your patience, and looking forward to seeing some of you in the session in the afternoon. Enjoy your lunch and the rest of your day.